Good afternoon. I am here with two wonderful guest artists, Mimi Stillman, a flutist who has been with us before, and Zhou Tian, who is a composer who wrote a brand new concerto for Mimi, which is part of an international consortium of orchestras. And we are proud to be doing it with the Annapolis Chamber Orchestra on November 12th at 8 p.m. at Maryland Hall. So, Mimi, Joe, welcome. It's so good to see you. And thank you for coming to Annapolis to do this.
Thank you, Maestro. Thanks, Ernie. Great to be here with you.
So I'm going to jump right into this piece because I've been sort of living with this for a while. A couple things that really sort of struck me, in particular, the imagery that pops up through this piece. The first movement, which I think is titled Irises, and I was really sort of struck by the description of that you have at the beginning of the movement. I'm just going to check myself. You talked about the irises being sensuous and strong. I really, as I look at this movement each day and I come back to it, I think of that description. So, Joe, can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts about that?
Iris is like you said, made me think about the flute because it's such a mystic and beautiful instrument. A lot of times when people think about flute and general public, they think about, oh, it's this kind of very fragile, sensuous instrument. But
Right.
there's also, of course, the other side. Not only can it be extremely rhythmic, like in some cultures, but also it has this kind of pinpoint sharpness and then this kind of really if you want to make a point, flute is right there. This fantastic sound, and with the orchestra supporting it, it just made me thought about this movement. It's kind of a combination of long singing lines and dances. In this particular first movement, it's more like airy dances. So that's the kind of construction of the first movement.
I felt like this movement to me was this big fantasia that was just sort of its own thing. And to me, it was more like a prelude to what would follow with the capriccio and then the arioso and the toccata. Is that kind of close to right?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. In terms of the structure of the piece, I think that from very early on, I decided it's going to be four movements instead of three.
Mm-hmm.
And I want the first movement, like many symphonies or many concertos, the first movement is usually the most mixed, right? The first
Right.
movement is where you can feel is where the composer pull in all of the ideas. And as the piece progresses, the composer's idea not becomes worse, but becomes simpler. It becomes more focused. So it's a slow movement,
Interesting.
a scherzo, the finale, the tempo and the mood of each one
Uh-huh.
becomes more simple in a way. But the first movement is always, whether it's a symphony or it's a violin concerto, or cello concerto, the first movement is always more mixed. It's like the composer is still trying to work out what the piece is going to be. Or it could also be the composer has so much to say. He or she hasn't decided what this is about, what the first.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we see so much first movement. First, in terms of length, first movement is usually longer than a lot of other movements. And two, it's kind of the most symphonic, the most mixed types of moods in the first movement. So this is the same.
In terms of the flute writing, one thing that Joe really exploited so well in this piece is really all of the capabilities of the flute, from the most cantabile or singing music with a lot of different timbres or tone colors, which you hear in the more lyrical sections of the first movement and third movement. So in that sense, I think they are connected in terms of what they are bringing out from capability. all the way to the most pyrotechnic, virtuosic, quick, fiery, bold and strong flute playing, as you were talking about, Joe. This whole concept of irises is the title of the first movement, but something that describes the essence of the flute concerto as a whole. The flute as being not just fragile and intimate, but also extremely powerful. In the first, it starts lyrically and it closes again in a slower atmosphere with the airy dances, as you call them, in the middle, the more jaunty and playful music. Playfulness also being a huge part of what you bring out from the flute and orchestra, because that is an element in the quick second and fourth movements too. So as Joe was saying, a lot of what we hear throughout the piece is laid out in the first with a lot of variety, but also a lot of kind of compositional focus in terms of these elements. The many culturally rich connotations in parts of the repertoire and even cultures where the flute appears, Baroque music is very important. So you won't necessarily hear Zhou Tian's third movement to the flute concerto and think, he was thinking about Baroque music, but there are some things there that sound like he was. And so it is, again, very singing in the flute, but also very contrapuntal in the way that he intertwines flute with other solo sections and soloists, including bassoon in this very important section of the movement where a new idea starts that leads us out through the end. Part of it where it goes into the 3/4 new material section.
Yes, what I really liked where you have the vibraphone, Joe, playing these A pedals. It was just really extraordinary.
Thank you so much, both of you. I mean, actually, that moment is, if I have to pick a favorite moment, that is my favorite moment of the piece. Is when in the third movement, it's we begin with this kind of back in time kind of feeling.
Right.
That the string has this pattern going on. To me, that's like a signal at the very beginning of the third movement, and the flute singing its line on top, and it kind of grows a little bit, and then we hit this middle part is almost back to chamber music, just 3-4 people, 2-3 people play music. And that's I don't know, that part, to me, I know it doesn't sometimes, what comes to composer doesn't translate to other people, the same feeling, but at least to me, that part is, there's a sense of loneliness there. It's just because the flute with bassoon, if they're doing 3-4, it just, to me, there is that a little bit of that loneliness. Maybe it's because of the pandemic or something, I don't know, but that part just came in there, and I wrote that part very quickly, and then because it just came.
I want to mention, I think that all our friends who are going to hear this piece at the Maryland premiere we're giving should listen for is the sense of pacing in your music, Joe, is always one of the things that has attracted me the most to it, because you have these marvelous ideas and then they're so dynamic, like the buildups, the sweeping energy in those moments where it just builds and crescendos is amazing. And then the moments where it comes back down to this very private or introspective world, but it's really a question of pacing and timing in the music. So I think everyone is probably going to very much enjoy this ride with us.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a piece that certainly our audiences are really going to like.
I'm so delighted to return with you to do Piazzolla by the lovely arrangement by James Kessler that was made for Annapolis Chamber Orchestra and me a few years ago. So
that's a wonderful arrangement. That really is a wonderful arrangement. But I am so excited to do this, and Joe, I'm so excited to meet you in person. Mimi, I cannot wait to see you and play this great music, and then I'm hoping this is yet another stop in our journey together, all of us. And let's do some more of this. I love it. This is a beautiful piece, and I can't wait to do this on November 12th at 8 o'clock at Maryland Hall.